This Sunday, Costa Ricans go to the polls to elect their next president, 2 vice presidents and 57 lawmakers. In Brazil, dozens of protests are taking place in different cities demanding justice for Moise Kabamgabe, a Congolese immigrant who was brutally murdered at his workplace. The 35th summit of the African Union began on Saturday in Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia, under the theme Developing Resilience and Nutrition in Africa, Enhancing Human Capital, Social and Economical Development. It will be the first face-to-face meeting of the conclave after 2 years of the pandemic. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Now we begin with the news. Costa Ricans went to vote for a new president in elections that have yet to see a clear favorite emerge among the 25 candidates, and also all held amid fears of a low turnout because of a surge in COVID-19 cases. People will also choose the new National Assembly, which takes place days after the country's top prosecutor filed papers seeking to lift outgoing President Carlos Alvarado's immunity so he can face charges related to the collection of personal information on citizens. To win outright in Sunday's first round, a candidate needs 40% of the vote. Otherwise, there will be a runoff on April 3rd between the top two. Polls show about a third of the country's 3.5 million voters are undecided. Polling conducted by the University of Costa Rica put veteran politician Jose Maria Figueres as the favorite on 17% of the vote. She is followed by former Vice President Linet Saborio with 12.9% and 2080s runner-up Fabricio Alvarado on 10.3%. Out of the 25 candidates running for president in this election, 4 are most likely to go to a runoff in April. Let's see the details in the following work.
This February 6th, over 3.5 million Costa Rican citizens go to the polls to elect their president, 2 vice presidents, and 57 lawmakers for the 2022-2026 term. 25 politicians register as presidential candidates. However, none of them is likely to obtain 40% of the votes needed to win in the first round, as a survey from the Center for Research and Political Studies of the University of Costa Rica revealed during the days prior to the elections. The poll showed that former President and National Liberation Party militant Jose Figueres leads the voting intention, with 15% support. Former Vice President and Christian Social Unity Party candidate Linet Saborio goes second with 13.7% of the ballots. An evangelical preacher and journalist Fabricio Alvarado is likely to obtain 10.6% of the votes. Jose Villalta, the candidate of the leftist Broad Front, is likely to win 7.6% of the ballots, and the Economist and Democratic Social Progress Party militant Rodrigo Chavez will have about 6.2% of support. 12 other candidates have preference levels that are not significantly different from zero. The political campaign focused on economic issues and comprised proposals such as taxing free zones and reducing the value-added tax. Candidates also stressed the importance of investing in the health system, whose almost universal coverage is a source of pride for Costa Ricans.
As over 3.5 million Costa Rican citizens vote in these general elections for their next president, 2 vice presidents and 57 lawmakers, let's review how the nation arrives at this election day.
Sunday's general elections come as Costa Rica reported record numbers of COVID-19 cases during the week, a situation that many believe will drive low voter turnout. In the face of the current wave of the COVID-19 pandemic the country experiences, the electoral authorities explained that the electoral process is carried out under strict biosecurity measures to avoid the spread of the coronavirus. To date, Costa Rica is the 6th most affected nation in the North American region. Health authorities report more than 700,000 infections and over 7,600 deaths. Costa Rica began its vaccination campaign back on December 24, 2020. So far, 73% of its population is fully vaccinated and over 12% have received the booster shot. Costa Rica's vaccination drive is carried out with the Pfizer and AstraZeneca vaccines. unemployment and corruption are the top concerns for Costa Ricans. According to surveys, the unemployment of 14.4% is the highest in a decade, except for 2020 when the economy was crippled by pandemic-related lockdown measures. 6,847 polling stations are available all over the nation so that citizens can exercise their right to vote. Should none of the presidential candidates obtain at least 40% of the votes, a runoff election will be held on April 3, 2022, between the two most voted candidates. Whoever wins the nation's presidency either this Sunday or in April will be sworn in on May 8th. The head of the Supreme Electoral Court said the first bulletin of the elections will be at 8:45 p.m. local time, with approximately 10% of the tables counted.
Let us now take a closer look at the background of the main contenders in these general elections.
Figueres, the candidate of the National Freedom Party, is an industrial engineer, politician, and international consultant who served as Foreign Trade Minister from 1986 to 1988, Agriculture and Livestock Minister during the President Oscar Arias administration, and President of the Republic from 1994 to 1998. Figueres' administration was controversial given that he implemented several policies that responded to the U.S. interests in the region, like the liberation of banks and the closure of the state-owned National Railways Institute. Saborio, the Social Christian Unity Party candidate, is a sociologist, criminologist, and lawyer who served as director of the Judicial Investigation Agency and as first vice president and economy minister during President Abel Pacheco's administration. I will put the human being back at the center of the agendas of institutions and public policies, recover a country's middle class, overcome citizen insecurity, generate more and better opportunities for all, and govern with transparency, she promised during her campaign. The journalist and New Republic Party candidate Alvarado served as a lawmaker during the 2014-2018 term. His political agenda upholds ultra-conservative positions on social issues such as opposing the legalization of cannabis, same-sex unions, abortion, and in vitro fertilization. Lawyer and environmentalist Villalta, the Board Front Party candidate, served as a lawmaker during the 2010-2014 and 2018-22 terms and was the third most voted candidate in Costa Rica's 2014 presidential election, with a margin of over 15% support. I do not come to work for elite groups who accumulate their profit through injustice and corruption, but for our people, he stated, recalling that his political agenda promotes sustainable economic growth and social inclusion of historically discriminated groups, such as the LGBTI community.
Let's take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. This weekend, protests are taking place in over a dozen Brazilian cities, demanding justice for Moise Kabamgabe, a Congolese immigrant who was brutally murdered at his workplace shortly after demanding he be paid his back wages. Our correspondent, Brian Meir, has more details.
In over a dozen cities in Brazil and around the world, protesters took to the streets to demand justice for Moise Kabamgabe, a 22-year-old Congolese immigrant who was tied and beaten to death behind the kiosk he worked in Rio de Janeiro, shortly after demanding 200 reais in back pay.
We are here to demand justice for our brother. I am an immigrant from Angola. They can't do this. Our brother died, and we can't remain silent about this, because if we do, it is going to happen again.
In São Paulo, thousands of members of the African immigrant community, the Brazilian black movements, unions, and working-class social movements gathered to block off Paulista Avenue, show their solidarity, and express their outrage at a racist double standard in which security forces, including the police officer who owns the Tropicalia kiosk where Moise worked, act as if the lives of black people are dispensable.
An African immigrant being beaten to death at 5 in the afternoon only because he asked for his back wages says a lot about this country, which has dismantled labor nights, that commits mass incarceration of the black population, that has turned violence into a spectacle. And we have come out today to say enough.
Security analysts believe the murder was carried out by a militia. The fact that it happened right down the beach from where militia leaders live in the same condominium complex with President Bolsonaro and his family has not been lost on anyone. Brian Meir, TeleSUR, São Paulo.
Thank you, Brian, for this report. And now we move on to other topics. In Colombia, less than 15 days after a parcel bomb was found inside an alternative house of a project involving a peace signatory in Bogota, another building where several ex-combatants sell products has been attacked, violated and robbed. They claim that these are direct attacks on peace. Our correspondent, Hernan Tobar, with the details.
La Roja Cultural House is a project of entrepreneurship of several ex-combatants who bet on peace. It sells various items made from some territories of recuperation. They claim that there are sectors that want to perpetuate the war in the country, since establishments like this and their promoters have been threatened, attacked, and assaulted. People forced their war into this property and broke windows and bars, stealing products from the peace signatories' initiatives.
They took boots from Caqueta, which are also handmade, as all our products are organic and handmade. They took shoes from the women of Aruac, Wayu, and Aruac handbags, a cash register, a computer, a coffee jar that were taken for a special edition of the 5th anniversary of the peace agreement, and some coffee bags that came from the north of Cauca.
They are sure that this is a sign of sabotage to the productive initiatives of social and economic recuperation, which seek to generate anxiety and collective fear. Despite these circumstances, they ratify their commitment to peace. There is an increase in actions against recuperated competence, which we believe has to do with the electoral moment we are living through. We believe that this is obviously linked to generating fear and anxiety, and that obviously those who are carrying out these acts, which is not only this one, but also the alternative, the murder of 297 ex-combatants, men and women, is framed in the logic of removing us from the political scenario, is framed in the logic of returning the country to a fratricide war. These attacks and violent acts have been systematic against the signatories. Recently, an explosive device was found inside the alternative house, a cultural space where also operates a restaurant, a meeting room of various leftist parties in Bogota. Representatives of these combatants claim that this government is ignoring not only the agreements but the mandate for potential measures. However, this government turns a deaf ears to the orders of the JEP for the protection of the signatory as well as to the declaration of the constitutional issues exposed by the Constitutional Court. The peace signatory called on the citizens to continue supporting with solidarity and affection this process and projects to continue on the road to peace and request the competent authorities to find those responsible for these acts against peace in Bogota.
Hernán Darío Tobar, TeleSUR, Bogotá, Colombia.
Venezuela celebrated the Day of National Dignity, so called in the homage of the civil-military rebellion in which the then Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chavez was part of a movement that attempted to change the direction of the South American nation. From Caracas, our correspondent Adriana Sibori with the details.
The day began at the Barracks La Montaña. The military who participated in the civil-military rebellion on February 4, 1992, paid homage to Commander Hugo Chavez, who is buried here. Chavez led that uprising against a system that drowned many Venezuelans. Poverty reached 60% of the citizenship. The cost of basic food and fuel services became unaffordable for the majority of the population.
That happens, a military uprising, per se, to found a nation or to refound the basis of a nation. Here it is. It was not a military coup, the traditional coup. It was not. It was not as they want to say and still say it. It was popular military rebellion against neoliberalism, against the government of the 50-point path, and against North American imperialism.
Meanwhile, the streets of Caracas were filled with Chavista supporters commemorating 3 decades of the uprising. For them, it was an uprising that gave an example of resistance.
30 years later, there are real facts, advances in housing, professionalized, technical and municipalized education. Venezuela today will not surrender to the pretensions of imperialism, with coercive measures violating the Rome Statute. They have condemned the people of Venezuela with unilateral measures, with international blockades, but we will win. There are young people who produce. There are young people who, in the midst of the economic war, have put on the share of dignity from the field, but also the youth of the companies and industry said that we will not render the homeland.
Soldiers welcomed the citizens in the march in the homage to that civic military union that was born in that uprising of 1992.
It remains in force. The people is there. The people prove it. We are in the streets, and always when the revolution calls us, the people come out to defend their rights, to defend the homeland, to defend Venezuela.
It was an event that marked the social and political life of Venezuela, and it is still recalled today.
Adriana Sibori, TeleSUR, Caracas.
Let's take a final short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. The 35th summit of the African Union began this Saturday in Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia, under the theme Developing Resilience and Nutrition in Africa, Enhancing Human Capital, Social and Economic Development. It will be the first face-to-face meeting on the conclave after 2 years of the pandemic. The agenda of the meeting includes issues related to peace and the economic growth in the continent, in addition to food security. One of the most important objectives is to agree on sustainable response to the impact of disease in the region, based on increased access to vaccines. The socio-economic consequences of the pandemic, the war in northern Ethiopia, tensions between Morocco and Algeria, instabilities in Chad, Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali and Sudan, forced displacements and the effects of climate change will also be on the agenda. One of the high points of the meeting is expected to be the questioning of the African Union's link with Israel. The Security Council of the United Nations condemned the killings of 60 civilians in an attack against a displaced community in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The events transpired in the displaced refugees camp in the country's northeast. Preliminary reports affirmed the attack was carried out by the cooperative militia of the Development of Congo. Members of the Security Council condemned the aggression and demanded the government to conduct an investigation that will guarantee the full extent of the law to be applied on those accountable. The chief of the UN mission in DRC, Bintou Keita, also spoke out heavily against the incident. Moroccan rescuers on Saturday pulled a 5-year-old boy out of a deep well where he was trapped for 4 days. The boy, named Ryan, emerged from a tunnel dug specifically for the rescue wrapped in a yellow blanket. Rescuers used a rope to send oxygen and water down to the boy, as well as the camera to monitor him. Ryan fell into a 32-meter well located outside his home in the village of Ingran in Morocco's mountainous northern Chemchaken province on Tuesday evening. No details were available about his condition. His parents had been escorted to an ambulance before the boy emerged. His plight had captured worldwide attention. Now we address other topics. On Friday, the U.S. health authorities recorded 2,400 deaths due to the coronavirus, bringing the total number of fatalities caused by the virus to more than 900,000. This is reflected on the latest update from the country's Center for Disease Prevention and Control, CDC, which also reported more than 330,000 new cases in a single day, bringing the total number of infections to more than 76 million since the start of the pandemic. Despite these records, the country is bending the infection curve, which had its highest peak on January 16th, when the country was immersed in a great wave of infections caused by the new Omicron variant, dominant in the country, as well as by the end of the year celebrations. Regarding the vaccination process, the CDC reported that about 64% of the U.S. population is fully immunized, while less than 75% of the citizens have already received at least one dose. After the release of the data, the president of the country, Joe Biden, remarked the importance of vaccines to save lives and fight the virus. This Friday, after collecting results of samples analyzed in laboratories on the Pan American Health Organization, the new Omicron variant of COVID-19 was detected in the Haitian territory. The country, despite belonging to insular America until mid-July last year, had not received a single dose of vaccines. However, by January 30th, there was a figure of 93,809 Haitians who had already a vaccine jab, according to data from the Ministry of Public Health. Haiti recorded a total of 26,807 confirmed cases and also 780 deaths due to COVID-19. Health authorities also pointed out that Omicron has a prevalence of 70% as of January 5th, compared to 30% for Delta. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.